Well, the main response in Ireland to the crisis of the Irish banks was for the Irish state to guarantee the debts of the Irish banks. The Irish banks owe enormous sums of money to European banks, which they invested recklessly in a property price bubble. Those debts have now become the property of the Irish citizens. So what was essentially a private sector debt has been transferred to the public sector. And the price that ordinary Irish people are paying for this is massive austerity. Tax increases, cuts in spending. Already, the so-called fiscal adjustment, the tax increases, the spending cuts amount to the equivalent of €4,600 for every Irish citizen. So that's the price that we are paying to bail out Irish banks, and in turn to bail out the people who lent money to the Irish banks, German, French, British and other banks. So this is the socialisation of a private debt. Now, what this means, of course, apart from the sheer injustice of this, what this means is appalling austerity for Irish people. Irish income, gross national product, is down 15% already. Unemployment is running at almost 15%. There are very high levels of emigration, running at about 40,000 per annum. And the economy is mired in recession. Investment levels are only a third of what they were a few years ago. Capital, in effect, has gone on strike in Ireland. There is little or no investment occurring. And this means that Ireland is not going to grow its way out of this recession. But that doesn't seem to concern Europe very much. They are simply insistent that they want Irish citizens to go on repaying these unjust and unsustainable debts. Now, one of the responses that we've undertaken in Ireland, my own organisation, AFRI, along with the Debt and Development Coalition Ireland, another NGO, and a trade union, Unite, was to commission a team of researchers to undertake an audit of the Irish debt. And they have just produced their report. Makes for very interesting reading. It shows that the overall scale of the debt is absolutely enormous, not just because of what's been paid out now, but also because there are a number of bills that may yet fall due. For example, the Irish Central Bank is pumping money into the private Irish banks, and that money is being guaranteed by the state. So there may be an even larger debt to pay in the future. The audit has also conclusively proven the point that this was not, in the first instance, a crisis of public debt. This was not a debt that arose because the Irish public sector was overstaffed or because Irish welfare entitlements were exceptionally generous. This was a crisis of private indebtedness. This is a crisis that has arisen because private institutions ran up enormous debts, and instead of having to deal with those debts themselves, they transferred those debts onto the ordinary citizenry. Another astonishing finding from this recently completed debt audit is that we do not know the identity of the so-called bondholders, the people to whom these loans are being repaid. That information is confidential, and we are not being allowed access to it. So this means not only are we paying an enormous debt, we actually are not even being allowed to know to whom the money is being paid. So on a whole number of levels, on the basic level of transparency and democracy, this debt is wholly illegitimate. The only just, equitable solution is for Irish people to default on this debt, to refuse to pay it. We did not cause this debt, and we should not be asked to pay it. And we certainly should not be asked to pay it to anonymous people who are hiding behind a cloak of commercial confidentiality. So we're hoping to mobilise support and mobilise a campaign calling for the repudiation of this odious and illegitimate debt burden. At the moment, campaigning in Ireland is limited. The trade union leadership is quite conservative and quite reluctant to commit to action. The population is very fearful, very anxious. But I think as we spread the word, as we spread the information about the nature of this debt, I think it will mobilise people into action, and I'm confident that we will be able to generate a wide-ranging and powerful campaign for a debt default. I think from the European point of view, I think a vital task of education concerns the taxpayers of countries like Germany. They have to understand that the money that they are lending to Ireland through the bailout fund is not helping Irish people. It's helping German, French, British, Dutch banks. That's where the money is ending up. So I think that point has to be got across. And the same is true of Greece. There is this perception, I think, in parts of Europe, oh, we are bailing out people who are lazy, people who are not willing to work as hard as us. That's not the case. This is not a bailout of the Greek people or the Irish people. This is a bailout of the financial sector. So I think there needs to be a greater realisation across Europe as a whole that this is really about subsidising rich financial institutions. And I think if that realisation occurs, then I think there will be a mass protest in Germany and elsewhere against what is happening, not because it's a subsidy to Ireland or a subsidy to Greece, but because it's a subsidy to Deutsche Bank or the Banque Nationale de Paris. And those are the actors, those are the agents that we need to take action against on a common, united European basis. It's not a case of Greeks versus Germans or Irish versus French. It's a case of ordinary people against the banks.